Detectives have recovered clothing and other items belonging to the late Deka Abdinoor, whose body parts were recovered at the Langata cemetery. Police visited the cemetery where clothing, bags and a mobile phone belonging to the murder suspect were recovered. Police have also arrested a taxi driver who took the suspect to the Langata cemetery.
It is very important that we listen to our parents because sometimes they just know better. Now, this is the realization that a lady in Kenya had, but she had it at a time when it was too late because she realized that she was now at the mercy of a serial killer she thought was her boyfriend. This case is coming from Kenya in the eastern part of Africa, and it tells the story of a lady who thought that she had found a decent man to marry her in the person of Hashim Dagane Mohammed, but she would eventually end up at a cemetery on the 31st of October 2024, diced and sliced up into several parts and carried there in body bags after he had actually cooked her up. Yeah, you heard me right. He cooked the remains that he chopped up. Now, it doesn't end there because this guy would be picked up again for 3 different murders. And this case is an ongoing case. But let's get back to the genesis. So, this lady is called Deka Abdinoor Gorone. Now, Deka met this guy. They fell in love. At least she thought he loved her back. It seemed so. Very handsome guy in the person of Hashim, and they wanted to get married. Hashim went to her family because they are both Muslims, but her family for some reason rejected Hashim's proposal. Deka didn't like this. She was devastated. They planned to go for a second time again, and Hashim came again to the family of Deka Abdinoor, and they still rejected Hashim Dagane's marriage proposal for their daughter. In fact, reports indicate that they didn't even want the relationship to continue at all. But Deka Abdinoor Gorone was not ready to hear of it. So, it's alleged that Hashim and Deka continued their relationship in secret. And they were having secret meetings, spending time together, all at a point in time where Deka's family were against this relationship and possible marriage. At this point, it's important that we remember that these guys were Muslims. And I don't know so much about the Muslim community, but one of the things I know is hardly do you see them engaging in such, dare I say, indecent acts. They are usually very disciplined and prim and proper, such that if their parents are against a marriage or a relationship, they end it. But in this case, Hashim and Deka didn't heed, because Deka's parents had advised her, but she still was with this guy. I don't know what it was, but she kept on. Up until a time on the 24th of October 2024, where Deka left home and didn't come back. Now, her family at this point reported her missing to the police. But little did they know that Deka was not missing at all. Deka had actually planned with Hashim to spend time together with him at an Airbnb in Kenya. So on that said date, Hashim Dagane and Deka Abdinoor had actually booked an Airbnb to spend time together. Whilst at the same time, Deka's family had reported her missing to the police, who were also searching for her. Now, this is one leg of the case. I'll pause here and ask you to please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so, and turn on post notifications. 2024 is about to end. Please help us hit 3,000 subscribers. Share the videos so we can all learn from these things and be security conscious as we go through our days. Now, back to the case. So they were in this Airbnb, and Deka, even at a point, went to a supermarket to get things to bring to this Airbnb so they can be there and they have everything that they need to be comfortable and cozy. She was caught on CCTV doing all these things. But then, little did Deka know that this guy was actually a serial killer who was already wanted for 3 murders, as at the time she was spending quality time with him, even as at the time he had come to her family to ask for her hand in marriage. The guy was actually on the run from the police, to the point he was an Uber driver who was now being sought after by the police as the prime suspect in the murder of a mother, her 12-year-old daughter, a mother, her daughter, and her 12-year-old cousin. And all this time, this guy was evading the police, swiftly evading the police. They set traps and he evades them. He was so comfortable in his cat and mouse games with the police to the extent that he found time to date Deka Abdinoor and found extra time to be visiting her family, trying to get her to marry him, and found time to still get into romantic getaways with Deka Abdinoor in the same country where the same country's police are hunting for him. That should tell you that this guy knows the game he's playing. And there's another secret to that I'll reveal as we go on, because this guy turned out to be everything nobody thought he could be. So, I digress. Back to the Airbnb. They were there spending time together from the 24th of October up until sometime on the 31st of October 2024, where CCTV at the Airbnb would capture Hashim Dagane Mohammed leaving the Airbnb alone. He went in there with Deka, but he left alone. And when he left, he was carrying some bags. And he just took off. Deka Abdinoor never left the Airbnb. She never left the Airbnb. Now, police would eventually trace Deka Abdinoor to the supermarket because the remains of the person they saw at the cemetery were in a bag from the supermarket, which had a receipt also in it. That receipt was traced back to the supermarket, and the police requested for CCTV footage of that supermarket, backdated it, and eventually saw Deka Abdinoor, and they realized that no, this person came through here. They did their cross-referencing and checks and traced her back to the Airbnb where she was with Hashim Dagane, and then did that checking as well. Got the CCTV footage from the Airbnb, saw Hashim leaving with the bags they had now found at the cemetery, and knew straight away that he was responsible for the remains of the person that they found in the bag, and that he is to be the prime suspect for this person's death, or let me say murder. So, adding the person they found in that bag to the 3 people whose deaths Hashim was already being hunted by the police for, it means that Hashim is now a suspected serial killer and is being held as the prime suspect of 4 different murder cases. The mother, her daughter, her 12-year-old cousin, and Deka Abdinoor, who at the time the police could not readily identify because even the remains that were found in the bag at the cemetery reportedly were not complete. And it's at this time that the advice to Deka Abdinoor to cut ties with this guy and not even date him or marry him begins to make sense. Maybe the parents who advised her didn't see that he was a serial killer at the time, but then instincts don't lie. Instincts don't lie. I always say that forget about how people smile and seem nice. Most people are wearing masks. It is when the masks go off, that's when you see what people are capable of. Because in this case, she never dreamt in her wildest dreams that this guy could be a serial killer. And to the point that this guy unalived her in that Airbnb, sliced her up, cooked her, and packaged her to the cemetery. It doesn't make sense because even her remains are not adding up. Some pieces are missing, and it begs the question, is this guy a cannibal? Did he eat some and maybe he couldn't finish and had to throw some away? Or what else did he do that we don't know? But guess what? There is still more to this guy, because the Airbnb where all this is suspected to have happened was also checked by the police. That particular room they booked was checked, only for the police to find that the room had seemingly been repainted, as though somebody was trying to cover up the crime that had happened there. And this was after Hashim Dagane had already been arrested by the police and was being held for 21 days. So who did the painting? They had to go and inquire from the owner of this Airbnb, but guess what? He was also nowhere to be found. Now, it seemed like Hashim Dagane probably have accomplices, and that maybe somebody painted the room to help him cover it up. People are suspecting this Airbnb person because he is nowhere to be found. And once he is nowhere to be found, he begins to look suspicious. I'm hoping he'll be found and we get to know whether he's an accomplice or not. Because there's also the other possibility that Hashim Dagane could have done the painting himself and left. But then the question would have been, since he left, hasn't anyone booked that room? Or didn't anyone check the room after he exited? And if someone checked the room, as an owner of an Airbnb, if somebody booked the room and exited and you saw the person has painted the room, that is if Hashim did paint the room himself, once the owner saw this, it should have raised a flag and should have been reported. So that is one gray area the police are still investigating. But guess what? Further investigations into the background of Hashim Dagane also revealed something else, because it turns out that Hashim Dagane is even not who he is saying he is. Although he's been identified as a serial killer, which is surprising in itself, it turns out there was more to him, because apparently he is an Ethiopian national who has now been able to obtain a Kenyan ID, and further checks into his Ethiopian background revealed that Hashim Dagane was actually a former police officer in Ethiopia. And that begins to make sense as to how come he was able to evade capture of the police for so long when they were looking for him. It doesn't end there. It is being rumored that during his time as a police officer, he was actually sent to prison for the murder of somebody else. But I looked at Hashim's picture and I was wondering, if Hashim Dagane was sentenced to prison for murder, he would have to do a number of years, maybe more than 10 to 25 years, or maybe even life, depending on the circumstances of the case. And if that's the case, how come Hashim Dagane still looks so young? It doesn't add up for me. Something seems off. But that is something else that we are waiting to see what police will uncover in that regard. But all in all, it goes to speak to the fact that this Hashim Dagane guy is something else. And it seems there could be more to him that is still yet to be uncovered. But unfortunately for Deka Abdinoor Gorone, she thought she had found her Romeo. She thought he had found love. Little did she know that she had actually fallen in love with a serial killer who was on the run for 3 murders. And unfortunately for her, she became her 4th victim of this suspected serial killer. Hashim Dagane is currently being held by the police for 21 days, but he hasn't been convicted yet. So technically, somebody can say he's innocent until proven guilty. But my heart goes out to the family and loved ones of Deka Abdinoor Gorone. I've always said, trust your instincts. Sometimes somebody will be screaming to you, watch this person, I have a bad feeling, watch this person, I have a bad feeling. Please don't ignore it. Even if you have your doubts about that person's instinct, leave some room for the possibility that the person could be right, so that you don't get caught by surprise like it happened to Deka Abdinoor. Because imagine she had left some room for that possibility. She could have had a chance to be alive today. I hope we are learning from these things and sharing with our loved ones so they are also able to learn, because this, technically, it can happen to anybody, whether male or female. Now, Hashim Dagane will definitely stand trial. As to whether he will beat these cases, we don't know, because forensics are still ongoing, DNA testing is still being done, the crime scenes have been processed, investigators are still doing their thing. This case is having a long way to travel, and sometimes it all comes down to evidence. If the evidence doesn't stack up strong enough, you might have this strong belief that this person is the one who committed these crimes, but the law wouldn't have much to hold him with and prosecute and convict him. And you could see the person walk away. That's the most painful part of some of these things. And I'm hoping that at the end of the day, the family of Deka Abdinoor Gorone will find justice, and the citizens of Kenya also would find some peace. I'm following the case, as and when there are updates, yours truly will definitely bring it to you. Thanks for watching the video. See you on the next one. Stay safe out there.